The year we went west on the Oregon Trail seems like a big adventure to me now, but at the time it was scary. My name is Katie Donaldson, and the year was 1843, the year I turned 10. It was an important year in the history of America. In the spring, my family and I picked up everything we had and left our farm in Tennessee. We joined hundreds of other families who my father said were fulfilling our manifest destiny. We were going to settle in the American frontier. We were called immigrants. We left everything we had behind to look for a new home where we'd never been before. Why did we risk our lives traveling in covered wagons for thousands of miles? What was behind what they called America's Great Overland Migration? Those answers lay along the Oregon Trail. In the 1830s, more than 160 years ago, nobody knew very much about the western half of North America. Back then, the United States ended at the Mississippi River. Very few white men had ever been west of the Mississippi. To them, the vast unexplored wilderness was called the Great American Desert. But a missionary by the name of Marcus Whitman believed he could cross the frontier by wagon and establish a church in Oregon Territory. In the spring of 1836, he set out with his wife, 2 wagons, and some friends. In 10 months, they reached Oregon and sent word back home that there was free land and the promise of wealth to anyone else who dared to cross the Oregon Trail. When my father first heard the news, he was not so sure, but our farm in Tennessee wasn't doing very well, and the promise of free land and a better life in the West finally got the best of him. So just after my 10th birthday in 1843, we packed our things and headed to Missouri, where we'd join a wagon train going to Oregon. When we arrived in Missouri that spring, I had never seen such a crowd of people before in my life. There were hundreds of us. We were all looking for wagons and oxen and horses for the journey. While my father and brothers looked for the livestock, my mother, sisters, and I looked for the provisions we would need on the trail. Finally, we joined up with other families headed for Oregon. We all searched for a guide who knew the trail and could lead our wagon train west. It all seemed so exciting at the time. But most of us had no idea of the dangers that lay ahead. On May 22nd, 1843, a huge caravan of wagons assembled just outside of Independence, Missouri, and our journey began. Our departure was wild. As fast as one wagon headed off, another would rush in ahead of it. Everyone wanted the lead spot, so there were many quarrels and fistfights. There were 120 wagons in our train. Nearly 1,000 of us left Missouri together that spring. Our fully loaded wagons weighed as much as 7,000 pounds, and it took as many as 12 horses to pull them across the plains. It didn't take us long to throw away the heavy piano Mom wanted to bring with us to Oregon. Almost every immigrant crossed the Oregon Trail on foot, small kids and grandparents alike. We all walked beside our wagons. We made about a mile an hour, traveling 16 miles a day. On the Oregon Trail, our days began early. At 4 o'clock, the sentries would shoot off their guns to wake us up. While Mom prepared our breakfast, my father and older brother saddled the horses, then harnessed the animals and packed our wagon. After breakfast, the wagon train was moving before sunrise. Before long, the hunters rode off to find the game for us to eat that night. When there were trees in our way, The grown-ups would clear a path with picks and shovels. We almost never drove our wagons in a single line. It was not as dusty if we spread out. Just before sunset, our trail captain usually rode ahead to find a good campsite. When he found one, he signaled us and we made camp by parking the wagons in a big circle. Once the wagon circle was closed and the livestock was safely inside, we all had our jobs to do. I went with the other kids to collect wood, or buffalo chips, for the cooking fires. While we were getting firewood, the men lowered the camp stoves and pitched our tents. The hunters had already returned with the game they killed that day, so Mom and the other women cooked our evening meal. They worked fast. Within an hour, dinner was served. After dinner, we got a chance to play until bedtime. It was a long day, and we were very tired. We usually went to bed early. But on special occasions, we danced around the campfire to fiddle or harmonica music. In I Hear Tell, there was often romance, because many couples met and married while crossing the Oregon Trail. Our wagon train followed the gentlest slope, where there was plenty of water for our animals to drink. As we moved west in 1843, the air grew warmer and trees became scarce. It was nothing like the forests we had left back home in Tennessee. There were a lot of rivers between Missouri and Oregon, and crossing them could be dangerous. It could take hours for the wagon train to cross a single shallow creek. But if we had to cross a deep, fast-running river, we often spent hours before we moved on. They called the Oregon Trail the world's longest graveyard. Some people say there's a body buried every 80 yards along the way. They say 1 out of every 10 people who made the trip died before they got to Oregon. Although the Oregon Trail could be dangerous, most of the time it was just plain boring. Everything was the same as we traveled through the plains. There were no trees, only shimmering haze and endless dust. The sun beat down day after day, mile after mile, until finally our wagons began rolling up towards the Rocky Mountains. I couldn't believe it. The first time I saw a buffalo, they were the strangest looking animals I had ever seen. We didn't have anything like them back in Tennessee. But the buffalo provided us with many of the things we needed on the trail. Buffalo meat was tough, but it was plentiful. Their hides made good blankets, and we used their dried droppings, known as buffalo chips, to make fire when there was no wood. Buffalo were known to stampede, and when they did, they left a path of destruction in their wake. We had to be careful to stay out of their way. By the time we reached Fort Laramie, we were nearly halfway to Oregon. From here, our wagon train headed up into the treacherous Rocky Mountains. So this was the last chance. If anybody was thinking of giving up and heading back home, very few people did. As we moved on, we skirted the most famous point on the trail, Independence Rock. My father figured if we were to make Oregon before the snows fell, we would have to reach Independence Rock by Independence Day, July the 4th. Even though we were in a hurry, we took time to write our names on the rocks beside the trail. As we crested the Rocky Mountains, we stood on top of the American continent. Mom told me if it wasn't for the gradual slope here, it would have been impossible to get the wagons to Oregon. By the time August arrived, we had reached Oregon Territory. By this time, some of the families in our wagon train decided that they didn't want to go any further. They had stayed to settle in towns in southern Idaho and eastern Oregon. But we continued, and in September, we crossed the Blue Mountains. Now the land was getting to look like back home. It took 40 axemen to chop the path for our wagons. The land was lush, and Dad said it would only be a few more weeks and we would be in our new home. But then the weather turned cold. It began to rain. We were miserable. Once we reached the trading post at the head of the Walla Walla River, most of the other wagons had gone their own way. But we were lucky. Our animals still had strength, and we followed the wooded paths beside the Columbia River toward the Pacific Ocean. Then, 2 of my brothers got sick. It became hard to find food, and it rained so much that the trail turned into a river of mud. After coming this far, we wondered if we would ever make it to our new home in Oregon. Some of the families who started across the Oregon Trail with us gave up, turned around, and went back. But most of the immigrants did not. Finally, we made it safely to our new farm in Oregon. When we arrived, the American population of Oregon was doubled. Within 3 years, more than 5,000 more immigrants made the trip, fulfilling their manifest destiny. In the future, many, many more would follow. For me, crossing the Oregon Trail might have been dangerous and uncomfortable, but I am glad we made the trip. It was the greatest adventure of my life.
We crossed the big muddy, the ferry was full of women and children and men. We turned toward the west and a new life out there. We'd not see Missouri again. Then the days turned to weeks in the mud and the rain. The oxen grew tired of the grind. Stories of Indians, death and disease constantly worked on my mind.